There's a point where every business owner starts to realize growth isn't the problem, scaling is. You've built something that works, customers are coming in, revenue's there. Maybe they've even thought about franchising or even started already. And on paper, everything looks like it should expand. But in reality, it's slower than expected. It's much more difficult, and every step forward seems to require more effort than it should. I'm Justin Kaiser, CEO of Empire Franchising, and I've spent the last 25 years building, scaling, and investing in businesses, including taking my own franchise brand from zero to over 100 franchise territories before an acquisition at the end of 2024. And what I've seen consistently is this: most businesses aren't limited by demand, they're limited by structure. There's a big difference between a business that works and a system that scales. That difference only becomes clear when you try to expand, because at a small level, you can compensate, you can make decisions on the fly, you can rely on instinct, you can stay close to everything. But when you try to scale, that stops working, because now every gap gets exposed, every consistency shows up, and what used to feel manageable starts to feel heavy. This is where most business owners hit a wall, not because the concept isn't strong, but because the system behind it hasn't been built to scale. And franchising is where a lot of people think that solves itself. They assume that once they create an FDD, once they have a few franchisees, that growth will follow. But franchising doesn't create scale. It exposes whether scale is possible. Because if your systems aren't tight, if your acquisition process isn't controlled, if your onboarding isn't consistent, if your unit economics vary too much, then franchising will amplify those issues, not fix them. Now that's where things start to slow down. Deals take longer to close. Franchisees don't perform consistently. Support becomes reactive instead of structured. And now, instead of building momentum, you're managing complexity. Now, this is the point where most franchisors either plateau or start questioning whether the model works at all. But the reality is, it's not the model, it's the infrastructure behind it. Because when franchising is done correctly, when the system is designed to scale from the beginning, it becomes one of the most efficient ways to grow business. But that requires a different approach. It requires thinking in terms of systems, not just operations. It requires building a growth engine, not just relying on referrals or sporadic demand. It requires a structured path from lead to signed franchisee and a defined process from onboarding to performance. Now, most business owners don't have that, not because they lack capability, but because that's not what they've spent years building. They've built a business, not a franchise system, and those are two very different things. This is exactly where a partnership becomes valuable, because instead of trying to figure all of this out on your own from scratch, instead of making the same mistakes that most franchisors make early on, you plug into a system that's already been built, already tested, already refined. At Empire Franchising, we don't approach this as a service. This is a partnership, because we're not interested in charging fees to help you franchise. We're interested in building something alongside you that can actually scale, which means we align our incentives. We build the infrastructure, we install the growth engine, and we create a system that can consistently produce franchise sales. We also build support for franchisees as they come in, because that's what drives expansion, not one-off deals, but a repeatable pipeline. Now, think about what that changes. Instead of guessing how to generate demand, you now have a system for generating it. Instead of wondering how to convert leads, you have a defined sales process. Instead of reacting to franchisee needs, you have a structured onboarding and support system. That consistency is what allows growth to accelerate, because now you're not solving new problems at every step. You're executing a system that's already been built, already refined. And as that system scales, it becomes more efficient. That's where the real leverage shows up, because now each franchise doesn't add complexity. It strengthens the system. It adds data. It improves performance. And over time, that creates a completely different type of business. Not just a brand, but a platform. This is something that can scale across markets, across operators, and eventually position for a much larger outcome. Now, that's the part that most people don't see at the beginning. They think in terms of opening more locations, but the real opportunity in franchising is building something that can be rolled up, something that can be valued at a higher multiple at some point, something that institutional capital actually wants to step into. And that only happens when the system is built correctly from the start. So if you're a business owner or you're already a franchisor and you're feeling that gap between what you've built and how fast it's scaling, don't assume it's a demand problem. Look at the structure, look at the system behind the growth, because that's where the constraint usually is. If you're looking for the right partner to help you build that out, build the system the right way, not as a vendor, but as someone aligned with your outcome, reach out to us at empirefranchising.com. We'll walk you through how we approach our partnerships, how we structure these systems, and whether it makes sense to build something together. You've built a great business. Now it's time to build your empire.